The laptop hinge creaked like our bedroom door at 3 in the morning when Beth thought I was asleep. Same guilty sound, same careful timing. But this Tuesday morning, she'd forgotten to close it before rushing out to her yoga class, leaving the screen glowing on our kitchen counter like a neon confession. I'm Ethan Parish, 39 years old, and I fix things for a living. Commercial electrical systems, mostly. The kind of complex wiring that keeps office buildings humming and hospitals running. 20 years in the trade, 12 of them running Parish Electric with my brother John. I understand current flow, resistance, and what happens when circuits overload. What I didn't understand until that Tuesday morning was how perfectly those principles applied to suburban marriage. Beth had left her laptop open to something called Oleander Lane Ladies, a private group chat I'd never heard of despite living on Oleander Lane for 8 years. The cursor blinked in an empty message box, and above it, 3 months of conversation scrolled like evidence in a case I didn't know I was part of. I should have closed it. Should have respected her privacy, finished my coffee, and headed to the job site where my crew was installing emergency lighting at the new medical center. Instead, I scrolled up to yesterday's messages and felt my world shift on its foundation. Mara OL. Tom's working late again. 3rd time this week. Either he's actually busy or he's terrible at lying. Beth Parish. At least yours pretends to work late. Ethan just falls asleep watching History Channel like he's studying for a test he'll never take. Talia M. Speaking of tests, Cole wants to meet Thursday instead of Friday. Something about his wife asking questions. Brielle T. Your trainer? Still? Girl, you're playing with fire. Talia M. Says the woman who borrowed $5,000 from HOA funds for her emergency dental work. Beth Parish. Wait, what? Brielle, you didn't. Brielle T. Relax. Julian's doing the books this quarter. I'll replace it before he notices. I read that exchange 3 times, my coffee growing cold in my hand. Talia was having an affair with her personal trainer. Brielle was embezzling from our homeowners association. And Beth was discussing it like neighborhood gossip, complete with laughing emojis. But that wasn't the worst part. I kept scrolling. Nola V. Anyone else's husband getting suspicious? Mine asked why I was texting so much during dinner. Beth Parish. Ethan doesn't notice anything unless it involves electricity or those stupid war documentaries. I could probably burn the house down and he'd ask if I checked the breaker box first. Mara OL. Tom notices everything. It's exhausting. He actually read my credit card statement last month. Talia M. That's why you get a separate card. I've had one for 2 years. Cole and I went to that new hotel downtown last week. The one with the rooftop bar. Beth Parish. The Meridian? Expensive taste. Talia M. Worth every penny. 3 hours, no interruptions, no History Channel. Brielle T. I'm jealous. The highlight of my week was quietly stashing Julian's medication so he'd be too drained to be interested in intimacy. Nola 5. You're terrible, but also brilliant. Beth Parish. I just tell Ethan I have a headache. Works every time. Sometimes I think he's relieved. I set the coffee mug down carefully, the way you'd handle live electrical wire. My hands weren't shaking yet, but I could feel the tremor building like voltage across a bad connection. 3 months of messages. 3 months of my wife discussing our marriage like a failed appliance, sharing intimate details with women who were lying to their husbands about affairs and theft. 3 months of me being painted as some oblivious fool who couldn't see past his own nose. The worst part? They weren't entirely wrong. I had been working late more often, taking on extra commercial jobs to build up our savings. I had been falling asleep during movies, exhausted from 12-hour days troubleshooting electrical systems that other contractors couldn't figure out. I had been distant, distracted, focused on providing for our family, while apparently missing every sign that my family was falling apart. But I wasn't stupid, and I sure as hell wasn't going to stay oblivious. I scrolled further back, looking for the beginning of this group, trying to understand how 4 women on our quiet suburban street had turned into some kind of conspiracy against their husbands. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Beth, Parish. New group, just us oleander ladies. What happens in here stays in here, right? Mara, OL. Absolutely. We need somewhere to vent without judgment. Brielle, T. And share information. I found out some interesting things about our HOA finances that you should all know about. Nola Thakurvi. This is perfect. I'm so tired of pretending everything's fine when Julian drives me crazy with his obsessive organizing. Talia M. Same here. And I have some news about Cole I've been eager to share but couldn't mention at book club. Beth, Parish. Then let's make this our real book club, the one where we tell the truth. That was the first message, posted 3 months and 2 days ago, right after Beth had come home from what she'd told me was a boring HOA meeting about landscaping. She'd seemed energized that night, more talkative than usual, asking me about my day with what I'd thought was renewed interest in our marriage. Turns out she was just gathering material. I kept reading, watching my wife transform from the woman I'd married into someone I didn't recognize, someone who mocked my work ethic, criticized my hobbies, and shared details about our intimate life with women who were actively betraying their own husbands. Beth, Parish. Ethan asked if I wanted to go to that new restaurant downtown for our anniversary. I said yes, but honestly, I'd rather just order takeout and watch Netflix. At least then I won't have to pretend to be interested in his stories about rewiring some office building. Mara OL. Men and their work stories. Tom spent an hour yesterday explaining why his golf swing is improving. An hour. Brielle T. Julian tried to show me his new filing system for our tax documents. I literally fell asleep standing up. Nola, Bracker V. At least your husbands have hobbies. Mine just works and sleeps. It's like living with a very boring roommate who pays half the mortgage. Beth for Parish. That's exactly what it feels like. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I just didn't come home one day. How long would it take Ethan to notice I was gone? Talia E.M. Probably not until he ran out of clean shirts. Beth Parish. Or until he couldn't find the remote control. I stared at that message until the words blurred. My wife was fantasizing about disappearing, and her friends were encouraging her with laughing emojis. These women had turned their marriages into entertainment, their husbands into punchlines. But the real revelation came in a message thread from just last week. Brielle T. Ladies, I need advice. Julian's been asking questions about the HOA account. I think he's suspicious. Nola V. Can you replace the money before he figures it out? Brielle T. Not without selling something big. My jewelry, maybe, or the car. Beth Parish. What if you don't replace it? What if you just come clean? Brielle T. Are you insane? He'd leave me, and then I'd have nothing. Mara Ol. Maybe that wouldn't be the worst thing. You're miserable anyway. Talia M. Mara's right. I'm happier with Cole than I've been in years. Maybe it's time to stop pretending. Beth Parish. What are you saying? Talia M. I'm saying maybe we should stop tiptoeing around what we really want. Life's too short to spend it with men who bore us to tears. Nola 5. Easy for you to say. You have somewhere else to go. Talia M. So find somewhere else to go, or someone else to go with. Beth Parish. Like who? Talia M. I have some ideas. Cole has friends, good-looking, successful friends who know how to treat women right. Brielle and Tal T. This conversation is getting dangerous. Beth Parish. Maybe dangerous is what we need. I read that exchange 4 times, each pass making the meaning clearer. These women weren't just venting about their marriages, they were planning escapes from them. And my wife was interested in whatever Talia was offering. The front door opened, and I heard Beth's yoga mat hit the floor with a soft thud. I had maybe 30 seconds before she walked into the kitchen and found me reading her private messages. 30 seconds to decide whether to confront her immediately or keep this discovery to myself. I closed the laptop and picked up my coffee mug, turning toward the window as Beth's footsteps approached. In the reflection, I could see her enter the kitchen, slightly out of breath, her cheeks flushed from exercise or guilt. "Morning," she said, the same cheerful tone she'd been using for months while writing about me like I was a broken appliance she couldn't afford to replace. "Morning," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "How was yoga?" "Good. Challenging. Mara was there. She said Tom's been working late a lot lately. I told her you've been busy too." The lie came so easily I almost admired it. She'd probably never spoken to Mara at yoga, but she'd definitely been talking to her, just not the way she was pretending. "Yeah, busy week ahead," I said, turning to face her. "That medical center job is more complicated than we thought. Might be working some long days." "Of course you will," she said, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I caught a flash of the contempt I'd been reading about, quickly covered by a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I should get going," I said, rinsing my mug in the sink. "The crew's meeting at 7. "Drive safe," she called as I headed for the door, already reaching for her laptop. I sat in my truck for 5 minutes before starting the engine, watching our house in the rearview mirror and thinking about electrical systems. When a circuit gets overloaded, you have two choices. You can add more capacity, or you can reduce the load. But when the problem is in the wiring itself, when the connections are corroded, the insulation is compromised, the whole system is working against you, sometimes the only solution is to tear everything out and start over. The question was whether to flip the breaker now or wait for the inevitable fire. I decided to wait, but first I was going to do some rewiring of my own. By the time I reached the job site, I had a plan forming. It wasn't revenge exactly. Revenge implied emotion, and what I felt was closer to professional curiosity. These women had created a network, a system for sharing information and coordinating deception. They thought they were invisible, protected by privacy settings and assumed ignorance. They'd never dealt with someone who understood systems the way I did. The medical center's emergency lighting system was a maze of redundant circuits and backup power sources, designed to keep critical areas illuminated even when everything else failed. As I traced wire runs through the ceiling that morning, I couldn't help thinking about the parallels to what I'd discovered at home. The Oleander Lane ladies had built their own kind of emergency system, a backup network for when their marriages inevitably failed. The difference was, they'd forgotten about the main breaker. "You're quiet today," said Marcus, my lead electrician, as we pulled wire through a particularly tight conduit run. "Everything okay at home?" Marcus had worked for Parish Electric for 6 years, long enough to read my moods and smart enough to know when to ask questions. He was also going through his own divorce, which made him sensitive to the signs of domestic trouble. "Just thinking through some wiring problems," I said, which wasn't entirely a lie. "The kind you can fix with tools, or the kind that require lawyers?" I stopped pulling wire and looked at him. "What makes you ask that?" "Experience," he said. "You get that same look I had right before everything went sideways with Jennifer, like you're calculating load capacity and realizing you're about to blow a fuse." Marcus was more perceptive than I'd given him credit for. His divorce had been messy. His ex-wife had emptied their joint accounts and moved in with her personal trainer, while Marcus was working a weekend job in another city. The parallels to what I'd read that morning weren't lost on me. "Hypothetically," I said, "if someone wanted to gather information about people who thought they were having private conversations, how would they go about it?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Hypothetically? Depends on how tech-savvy these people are and how private they think their conversations actually are. Most people assume their group chats are secure, but there are ways to monitor network traffic if you know what you're doing." "What kind of ways?" "Router logs, for one. If you have admin access to your home network, you can see every device that connects and track data usage patterns. social media monitoring software, if you want to get fancy about it, or you could go old school and just pay attention to behavior patterns. I filed that information away as we continued working. Marcus was right about router logs. I had admin access to our home network because I'd set it up myself. But what he'd said about behavior patterns was more interesting. The women in Beth's group had been meeting virtually for months, but they'd probably been meeting physically too. Book clubs, yoga classes, coffee dates, all the normal suburban social activities that would give them opportunities to coordinate their stories. Hypothetically, I continued, what would you do if you found out someone was using your own network to plan things that would hurt you? Marcus stopped working and gave me a long look. Hypothetically, I'd document everything, make copies, and then I'd figure out how to use their own system against them. Information is power, but only if you know how to apply leverage. That afternoon, I left the job site early and drove to the electronics store. I told myself I was just gathering tools, the same way I'd gather wire strippers and voltage testers for any other job. But as I loaded network monitoring software and a new external drive into my cart, I knew I was crossing a line I'd never crossed before. The thing about electrical work is that it requires precision. You can't just start cutting wires and hope for the best. You have to understand the system, map the connections, and plan your modifications carefully. Rush the job, and you'll either electrocute yourself or burn down the building. I spent the rest of the afternoon in my home office, learning how to use the monitoring software and reviewing our router's connection logs. What I found was enlightening. Beth's laptop showed heavy data usage during specific time windows, usually late morning after I'd left for work, and again in the evening while I was watching television. The usage patterns suggested video calls, not just text messaging. These women weren't just typing insults about their husbands. They were meeting face-to-face virtually, probably sharing screens and documents, coordinating their activities in real time. I was setting up the monitoring software when Beth came home from her errands. I could hear her moving around downstairs, opening and closing cabinets, running water. Normal domestic sounds that had taken on a different quality now that I knew what she really thought about our domestic life. "Ethan," she called up the stairs. "Dinner in 20 minutes. "Be right down," I called back, quickly minimizing the software windows and closing my laptop. Dinner was grilled chicken and vegetables, the same healthy meal Beth had been making twice a week for the past year. She talked about her day, errands, a phone call with her sister, plans to have lunch with Mara tomorrow, all perfectly normal conversation that I now knew was probably a mixture of truth and misdirection. "How's the medical center job going?" she asked, cutting her chicken into precise, small pieces. "Complicated," I said. "Lots of redundant systems to integrate. Takes time to understand how everything connects." "Sounds tedious." "It's actually interesting once you see the big picture. Every circuit has a purpose, every connection matters. Change one thing, and it affects the whole system." She nodded absently, already mentally elsewhere. I wondered if she was thinking about tomorrow's lunch with Mara, or about whatever Talia had meant by good-looking, successful friends. After dinner, Beth settled into the living room with her laptop while I loaded the dishwasher. Through the doorway, I could see her typing, pausing to read responses, typing again. The monitoring software I'd installed would be capturing every keystroke, every website visit, every file transfer. But I didn't need software to tell me she was messaging the Oleander Lane ladies. Her body language was enough, the slight forward lean, the occasional smile at something on the screen, the way she glanced toward the kitchen to make sure I wasn't watching. I was watching, though. I was paying attention in a way I hadn't in months, maybe years, and what I saw was a woman who was comfortable lying to her husband, comfortable enough to do it from the same room where he was cleaning up after the dinner she'd cooked for him. That night, after Beth had gone to bed, I reviewed the data the monitoring software had collected. Group video call lasting 43 minutes, file downloads from a cloud storage account I didn't recognize, multiple Google searches for divorce attorneys, asset protection strategies, and something called collaborative divorce mediation. My wife wasn't just complaining about our marriage to her friends, she was researching how to end it. I spent the next hour reading about collaborative divorce, learning that it was supposedly a gentler alternative to traditional divorce proceedings. Both parties worked with trained professionals to divide assets fairly and minimize conflict. It sounded reasonable, even civilized, until I read the fine print about asset disclosure and financial planning. Beth had been downloading guides about protecting personal assets during divorce proceedings. She was planning to leave me, and she was planning to take as much as possible when she did. The next morning, I waited until Beth left for her lunch with Mara, then accessed the router logs to see what she'd been doing online. The search history was damning. How to hide assets before divorce? Can my husband take my inheritance? What is considered marital property? And dozens of similar queries. But the most interesting discovery was a series of visits to a real estate website. She'd been looking at apartments, condos, and rental properties. All of them were in the same general area where Talia's trainer worked. I was beginning to understand the scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just a group of bored housewives venting about their marriages. It was a coordinated effort to escape those marriages, with Beth as an active participant rather than a passive observer. The question was what to do with this information. I could confront her directly, but that would only accelerate whatever timeline she was already following. I could contact a lawyer myself, but that felt like surrender, an admission that our marriage was beyond repair. Or I could do what Marcus had suggested, use their own system against them. That afternoon, I created a fake email account and began researching the other women in the group. Social media made it easy. Mara's Facebook page showed photos from recent trips that didn't include her husband Tom. Brielle's Instagram featured expensive jewelry and clothes that seemed inconsistent with her husband Julian's income as a forensic accountant. Nola's Twitter account was full of complaints about her boring life and hints about wanting something more exciting. And Talia's fitness blog included photos with her trainer Cole, pictures that showed a level of intimacy that went well beyond professional instruction. Each woman had left a digital trail that contradicted the image she projected to her husband. They thought they were being careful, but they'd made the classic mistake of people who don't understand technology. They assumed that privacy settings meant actual privacy. I spent the evening planning my approach. Direct confrontation wouldn't work. These women had already demonstrated they were comfortable lying to their husbands. Legal action would be expensive and time-consuming, and it wouldn't address the root problem of 4 marriages that were apparently beyond repair. But information warfare, that was something I understood. In the Army, I'd learned that the most effective way to neutralize an enemy network was to turn it against itself, make the members distrust each other, question their communications, doubt their allies. The Oleander Lane ladies had created a network based on shared secrets and mutual deception. All I had to do was introduce a little chaos into their system and let their own paranoia do the rest. I started by creating a more sophisticated fake identity, not just an email account, but a complete online presence for someone who could believably join their group, someone who would fit their demographic and share their apparent dissatisfaction with marriage. Meet Aria Venton, recently divorced, new to the neighborhood, looking for friends who understood what it was like to start over after a failed marriage. Her social media history showed a messy divorce from a cheating husband, a move to our city for a fresh start, and just enough personal details to seem genuine without being verifiable. It took me 3 days to build Aria's online presence, working late in my office while Beth slept. Fake social media accounts, a few carefully crafted blog posts about surviving divorce, even some staged photos using stock images and photo editing software. The final touch was a rental listing for a house 2 streets over from Oleander Lane. According to public records, the property was owned by an investment company and had been empty for 6 months, perfect for a fictional new neighbor who might be looking for social connections. Now I just had to figure out how to introduce Aria to the Oleander Lane ladies without raising suspicions. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Beth's laptop was open again Thursday morning, and this time I was ready for it. The monitoring software had been running for 3 days, capturing every message, every file transfer, every video call. What I'd learned was that the Oleander Lane ladies weren't just planning individual escapes from their marriages, they were coordinating them. Mara OL. Tom asked about the credit card charges from that weekend in Chicago. I told him it was a girls' trip, but he's getting suspicious. Beth Parish. What kind of suspicious? Mara OL. He wanted to know which hotel, which friends, why I didn't mention it before. I think he might be checking up on me. Talia M. That's why you need to be smarter about it. Cole and I use cash for everything. No paper trail. Brielle. T. Easy for you to say. Julian monitors every penny. I had to tell him the HOA money was for emergency landscaping repairs. Nola 5. Did he believe it? Brielle, T. For now, but he's asking to see invoices. I'm running out of time. Beth Parish. Maybe it's time to stop running and start planning. Talia M. What do you mean? Beth Irish. I mean, maybe we should coordinate this better. If we're all going to make changes, we should do it together. Support system. Mara OL. Like what kind of coordination? Beth Bart Parish. Legal advice, for one. Financial planning. Somewhere safe to stay if things get complicated. Talia M. I like where this is going. Cole knows people who could help. Brielle. T. What kind of people? Talia M. Lawyers who specialize in protecting women's assets. Financial advisors who understand how to shelter money. Even private investigators if we need them. Nola Afu V. This is getting serious. Beth Parish. It was always serious. We've just been pretending it wasn't. I stared at the screen, feeling something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about my marriage anymore. These women were planning a coordinated assault on 4 families, with professional help and legal protection. They were treating their husbands like adversaries in a war we didn't know we were fighting. But wars require intelligence, and they'd just handed me their battle plans. I screenshot every message, saved every file they'd shared, and began mapping their network of contacts. Talia's trainer Cole was apparently connected to divorce attorneys, financial advisors, and private investigators. That suggested either a very well-connected personal trainer or someone who'd helped other women escape their marriages. The more I learned about their coordination, the more I realized how outmatched their husbands were. Tom, Julian, and the others were going about their daily lives while their wives planned strategic divorces with professional assistance. But I had advantages they didn't. I knew what was coming. I had access to their communications, and I understood something about psychological operations that most suburban husbands wouldn't. It was time to introduce Aria Venton to Oleander Lane. I started with Nextdoor, the neighborhood social media platform that Beth checked religiously for local gossip. Aria's first post was carefully crafted to attract attention without seeming desperate. Hi everyone, I'm Aria, just moved to the beautiful house on Maple Street, 2 blocks from Oleander. Recently divorced and starting fresh in a new city. Looking forward to meeting neighbors and maybe finding some like-minded women who understand that sometimes life requires major changes. Anyone know of good book clubs, coffee groups, or just friendly places to meet people? I'm particularly interested in connecting with other women who've navigated difficult transitions. The post was designed to hit every trigger I'd identified from monitoring the group chat. Recent divorce, new to the area, looking for women friends, emphasis on difficult transitions. If the Oleander Lane ladies were actively recruiting allies for their coordinated escape plan, Aria would seem like perfect potential member. I posted it at 9:47 a.m., right after Beth left for what she'd called errands, but which I knew was actually a coffee meeting with Mara to discuss their husband's increasing suspicions. By noon, Aria had received 3 private messages. The first was from a woman named Carol who lived on the next street over and wanted to invite Aria to her weekly Bible study group. The second was from someone offering house cleaning services. The third was from Beth. Hi, Aria. Welcome to the neighborhood. I live on Oleander Lane and would love to meet for coffee sometime. I know how hard it can be to start over in a new place, especially after a divorce. I have a few friends who I think you'd really connect with. We're all going through various life transitions and have found it helpful to support each other. Would you be interested in joining us for lunch this weekend? Nothing formal, just good food and honest conversation. Let me know. Beth. I read the message 3 times, marveling at how perfectly Beth had taken the bait. She was actively recruiting for their group, looking for allies who could provide mutual support during their planned divorces. Aria's fictional background made her seem like both a potential asset and someone who would understand their situation. I waited 2 hours before responding, long enough to seem like someone who was busy with moving and settling in, but not so long as to seem uninterested. Hi, Beth. Thank you so much for reaching out. I'd love to meet for coffee and lunch. Sounds wonderful. I have to admit, I'm a bit nervous about making new friends after everything I've been through, but you seem really genuine. My divorce was pretty messy. My ex was cheating with his secretary, very cliché, and I'm still learning how to trust people again. But I'm ready to start building a new life, and good friends seem like an essential part of that. When and where works for you? Aria. The response was calculated to establish Aria's credibility while hinting at the kind of experiences that would resonate with the group. Cheating husband, messy divorce, trust issues, desire for a fresh start. All themes that had appeared repeatedly in their group chat conversations. Beth's reply came within minutes. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you went through that. Unfortunately, you're not alone. Several of us have dealt with similar betrayals. That's actually how our little group formed. We all needed people who understood what it's like when the men in your life let you down. How about Saturday lunch at Cafe Luna downtown, 12:30? I'll bring a friend or two if that's okay. Looking forward to meeting you. Beth. Perfect. Beth was already positioning the meeting as a recruitment opportunity, planning to bring other members of the group to evaluate Aria's suitability. This was exactly how I'd hoped they would respond. I spent the rest of Thursday and all of Friday preparing for Aria's debut. The challenge was that I couldn't actually attend the lunch meeting. I needed to create a believable excuse for why Aria would have to cancel at the last minute, while still maintaining contact with the group. The solution came from monitoring their continued group chat conversations. Talia had mentioned that Cole's divorce attorney friend was hosting an informal consultation session for women in transition on Saturday afternoon. Several of them were planning to attend after lunch. I had Aria send a message Saturday morning. Beth, I'm so sorry, but I have to cancel lunch today. My divorce attorney called with an emergency. Apparently, my ex is trying to challenge our settlement agreement, and we need to meet immediately. I'm devastated to miss meeting you and your friends, especially since I was really looking forward to connecting with people who understand what I'm going through. Is there any chance we could reschedule? Or maybe I could join your group chat or email list to stay in touch. I really need the support right now. Aria. The message served multiple purposes. It established Aria as someone dealing with ongoing divorce complications, positioned her as eager to join their support network, and specifically requested access to their group communications. Beth's response exceeded my expectations. Aria, don't even think about apologizing. Legal emergencies always come first, trust me on that. Actually, your timing might be perfect. A few of us are meeting with a divorce attorney this afternoon for consultations. Maybe your situation and ours could benefit from the same kind of legal advice. I'm going to add you to our private group chat so you can stay connected with all of us. We call ourselves the Oleander Lane Ladies, even though not everyone lives on Oleander. It's more about the mindset than the address. Welcome to the sisterhood. Beth. 20 minutes later, Aria Venton was added to the Oleander Lane Ladies group chat. I was in. The first thing I did was read through the entire message history from Aria's perspective, looking for patterns and relationships I might have missed. What I found was even more damning than I'd realized. This wasn't just a support group for unhappy wives. It was an organized network for extracting maximum assets from divorce proceedings while minimizing their husband's ability to fight back. They shared information about hiding money, documented evidence of their husband's supposed faults, and coordinated their stories to present themselves as victims rather than willing participants in failed marriages. Talia had been having an affair for over a year, but the group had helped her document instances where her husband had been emotionally unavailable or financially irresponsible. Brielle had embezzled money from the HOA, but they were crafting a narrative about Julian's controlling behavior around finances. Mara's secret trips with other men were being reframed as necessary self-care in response to Tom's workaholic tendencies. And Beth, my wife Beth, was documenting every time I worked late, every evening I fell asleep watching television, every instance where I'd failed to meet her unstated emotional needs. She was building a case for why I was an inadequate husband who deserved to lose half his assets and ongoing alimony payments. But now, I had access to their coordination efforts. I could see their strategy meetings, their document sharing, their legal consultations. Most importantly, I could participate in shaping their plans. Aria's first message to the group was designed to establish her credibility while gathering intelligence. Ladies, thank you so much for including me. Beth told me you're all going through similar situations, and honestly, it's such a relief to find people who understand. My attorney meeting was eye-opening. Apparently, there are a lot of financial protections I should have put in place months ago. She gave me a whole list of things to document and preserve before my ex tries to hide assets. I'm assuming you've all been through this process? Any advice for a newcomer? I feel like I'm playing catch-up on protecting myself. The responses came quickly. Beth, Parish, Aria, we've all learned the hard way that you have to protect yourself first. The men in our lives certainly aren't going to look out for our interests. Talia, M. Document everything, every conversation, every financial transaction, every time they do something that shows their true character. Brielle T. And start separating your assets now, before they realize what's happening. Open your own accounts, establish your own credit, make sure you have access to money they can't control. Mara OL. Most importantly, don't let them know you're planning anything. Men get dangerous when they feel threatened. Nola V. Aria, what kind of timeline are you working with? Are you planning to file soon? Aria V. I'm not sure yet. My attorney said I should take time to get everything in order before making any moves. She emphasized that preparation is everything. The better prepared I am, the better my outcome will be. What about you all? Are you coordinating your timelines? Beth, Parish. We've talked about it. There are advantages to moving together. Shared legal costs, emotional support, even practical things like helping each other find places to live. Talia, M. Plus our husbands all know each other. If one of them gets suspicious, they'll probably warn the others. Better to move before they have time to organize. Brielle. Julian's getting close to figuring out the HOA situation. Once he does, I'll have to move fast. Mara OL. Tom's already asking questions about my activities. I don't think I can keep him in the dark much longer. Aria V. It sounds like you're all dealing with similar pressure. Have you considered that maybe your husbands are already suspicious and just haven't said anything? Men can be sneaky when they want to be. That message was designed to introduce paranoia into their group dynamic. If they started questioning whether their husbands were already aware of their plans, they might make mistakes or turn on each other. The response was immediate. Nola for V. What do you mean? Aria for V. Well, my ex knew about my divorce plans for weeks before I realized he knew. He was monitoring my internet usage, checking my phone, even following me sometimes. I thought I was being so careful, but he was building his own case against me the whole time. By the time I figured it out, he'd already moved money around and lined up his own attorney. I'm just saying, if your husbands are friends, they might be sharing information you don't know about. Beth, Parish. Ethan's not that smart. He barely knows how to use his own phone. Talia M. But what if they hired someone to help them? Private investigators, attorneys, whatever. Brielle T. Julian's paranoid enough to do something like that. Mara OL. Now you're making me nervous. Tom has been asking weird questions lately. Aria V. I don't want to freak anyone out, but maybe you should check your internet history, see if anyone's been monitoring your online activity. There are ways to tell if someone's tracking your computer or phone usage. I was planting seeds of doubt and paranoia, making them question their operational security and trust in their husband's ignorance. If they started checking their devices for monitoring software, they might find the programs I'd installed. But they might also start making mistakes, communicating less freely, or turning on each other. The conversation continued for another hour, with each woman becoming increasingly worried about what her husband might know or suspect. By the end, they'd agreed to meet in person the next day to discuss security measures and acceleration of timelines. Perfect. The more pressure they felt, the more likely they were to make mistakes, and I would be there, through Aria, to help guide those mistakes in directions that would benefit me. But first, I needed to understand exactly what resources they had access to through Talia's trainer Cole and his network of divorce professionals. If I was going to turn their own system against them, I needed to know how that system worked. Sunday afternoon, while Beth attended what she told me was a neighborhood planning committee meeting, I used the monitoring software to track her actual location. She was at Talia's house, along with the other 3 women, planning their coordinated assault on their marriages. Meanwhile, Aria was participating in the group chat, gathering intelligence and sowing discord. It was time to escalate the operation. The Oleander Lane ladies' emergency meeting Sunday afternoon lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes. I know because the monitoring software tracked Beth's location the entire time, while Aria participated in their increasingly frantic group chat messages. What I learned changed everything. Talia M. Cole's attorney friend says we need to move within the next 2 weeks if we want to file together and share costs. Brielle T. 2 weeks? That's not enough time. Julian will definitely notice if I try to move money that fast. Mara OL. Tom's already suspicious. Yesterday he asked to see my phone to look up a restaurant. I made an excuse, but he's definitely watching me. Beth. Parish. Ethan's been acting weird too, asking more questions about my day, paying attention when I'm on the computer. It's probably nothing but still. Aria V. That's exactly how it started with my ex. First the casual questions, then the increased attention, then I found out he'd been documenting everything for months. Nola V. What if they already know? What if we're walking into some kind of trap? Talia M. Then we move faster. Cole says his attorney can file papers for all of us by Friday if we get the documentation together. Beth. Parish. What about the financial stuff? I haven't moved any money yet. Brielle T. Same here, and I still need to replace what I borrowed from the HOA account. Aria V. Ladies, I hate to say this, but you might be past the point where you can hide your preparations. If your husbands are already suspicious, trying to move money now could make things worse. Mara OL. What are you suggesting? Aria V. Maybe it's time to consider that one of your husbands has figured out what's going on and warned the others. Maybe they're coordinating their own response. The paranoia I'd been cultivating was taking root. Each woman was now questioning not just her own operational security, but whether her friends' husbands had compromised the entire group. Talia M. That's ridiculous. These men can barely coordinate watching a football game together. Aria V. My ex said the same thing about his friends. Turned out they'd been sharing information for months. Men protect each other when they feel threatened. Beth. Parish. Ethan's not smart enough to organize something like that. Aria V. What does Ethan do for work again? Beth. Parish. Electrical contractor, commercial stuff mostly. Aria V. So he understands complex systems, troubleshoots problems for a living, and probably has experience with surveillance equipment. There was a long pause in the chat before Beth responded. Beth, Parish. I never thought about it like that. Brielle, T. Julian's a forensic accountant. If anyone could track financial irregularities, it would be him. Mara Oel. And Tom works in insurance. He investigates fraud for a living. Nola V. Oh God. We're married to exactly the kind of men who would know how to catch us. Aria V. I don't want to panic anyone, but maybe you should assume they already know and plan accordingly. Talia M. What does that mean? Aria V. It means stop trying to hide and start protecting yourselves. If they're building cases against you, you need to build better cases against them. I was steering them toward a more aggressive approach, one that would force them to make their moves prematurely and without adequate preparation. The more rushed and desperate they became, the more mistakes they would make. Beth Parish. How do we do that? Aria V. Documentation, but not the kind you've been doing. You need evidence of them monitoring you, controlling you, threatening you. You need to make them look like the aggressors. Brielle T. That sounds manipulative. Aria V. Everything about divorce is manipulative. The question is whether you're going to be better at it than they are. Talia M. Aria's right. Cole's been saying the same thing. We need to control the narrative. Mara OL. What kind of evidence? Aria V. Start with the monitoring. If they're tracking your internet usage or phone activity, document it. Take screenshots, save files, create a record of their surveillance. This was dangerous territory. If they found the monitoring software I'd installed, it would provide exactly the kind of evidence Aria was suggesting they collect. But it would also expose my operation and potentially give Beth grounds for a more favorable divorce settlement. I was betting that their panic would override their technical competence. These women had been sloppy about operational security for months. They were unlikely to become experts in digital forensics overnight. Beth Parish. How do we check for monitoring software? Aria V. There are apps that can detect it, but honestly, if your husbands are as smart as they seem, they probably know how to hide their tracks. You might be better off just assuming you're being monitored and acting accordingly. Talia M. Acting how? Aria V. Give them something to find. Create evidence that makes you look like the victim and them look like the aggressor. Nola V. That seems dishonest. Aria V. Is it more dishonest than them spying on you? Is it more dishonest than them hiding assets or planning their own legal strategies? You're not creating fake evidence, you're just making sure the evidence shows your perspective. Beth Parish. What kind of evidence? Aria V. Document every time they question you, every time they check your phone, every time they make you feel controlled or threatened. Keep a journal of their behavior. Record conversations if your state allows it. Brielle T. Julian does ask a lot of questions about money. Mara OL. And Tom has been checking my phone. Beth Parish. Ethan's been asking about my schedule more than usual. Aria V. See? You're already being controlled and monitored. You're just not documenting it properly. I was reframing their husband's natural suspicions as evidence of controlling behavior. Every question about unexplained expenses, every request to see a phone, every inquiry about daily activities could be positioned as psychological abuse rather than reasonable concern about a spouse's secretive behavior. Talia Wham. This is good. Cole's attorney will love this kind of documentation. Ario V. Just make sure you're careful about how you document it. If they're monitoring your devices, you don't want them to see you building a case against them. Beth Parish. How do we do that? Aria V. Separate devices, cash purchases, maybe even a safety deposit box for important documents. Brielle T. This is getting complicated. Area of V. Divorce is complicated, but you're smart women, and you have each other for support. Just remember, they're probably coordinating their response, so you need to coordinate yours better. Mara OL. What if we're wrong? What if they don't know anything? Arya V. Then you'll be prepared for when they do find out. But honestly, based on what you've told me about their jobs and recent behavior, I think you should assume they know. The conversation continued for another hour, with each woman becoming increasingly convinced that her husband was part of some coordinated surveillance operation. By the time they signed off, they'd agreed to meet with Talia's attorney friend within the week and to begin immediate documentation of their husband's controlling behavior. Perfect. I'd successfully turned their own paranoia against them while positioning myself to monitor their escalated activities through Arya's continued participation in the group. But I wasn't done. If they were going to accelerate their timeline and become more aggressive in their approach, I needed to be ready with countermeasures. That evening, while Beth was upstairs organizing closets, I began implementing the next phase of my operation. If the Oleander Lane ladies wanted to play psychological warfare, I was going to show them how it was really done. I started by creating evidence that would support their paranoia while actually benefiting my position. Using the router logs and monitoring software, I generated reports showing unusual network activity that could be interpreted as surveillance, but which was actually just normal internet usage patterns. I saved these reports to a folder on our shared computer where Beth would eventually find them. Then I began documenting her actual behavior in ways that would contradict whatever victim narrative she was planning to construct. The monitoring software had captured months of her real activities: the affair planning, the asset research, the coordination with other wives. All of it time-stamped and verified. If she wanted to claim I was controlling and suspicious, I had evidence showing exactly what I'd been suspicious about and why. But the most important element was positioning myself as the reasonable party who discovered his wife's deception and responded appropriately. Every action I took from now on would be documented and justified, creating a record that would serve me well in any legal proceedings. The next morning, I implemented a test of their new security consciousness. I had Arya send a message to the group. Arya V. Ladies, I think someone might be monitoring our chat. I noticed some unusual activity on my phone yesterday after our conversation. Has anyone else experienced anything strange? The response was immediate and panicked. Beth, Parish. What kind of activity? Arya V. Apps running in the background that I didn't start, data usage higher than normal, that kind of thing. It might be nothing, but my attorney warned me to watch for signs of surveillance. Talia M. Should we switch to a different platform? Arya V. Probably, but first, everyone should check their devices for monitoring software. Brielle T. How do we do that? Arya V. There are apps that can scan for spyware, but if your husband's installed it, they might know how to hide it. Mara OL. This is terrifying. I had no idea they could do this kind of thing. Nola V. What if they've been reading our messages this whole time? Arya V. Then they know about our plans and they're probably preparing their own response. You need to move fast. Within hours, all 4 women had downloaded spyware detection apps and begun scanning their devices. Beth's laptop showed several false positives, legitimate programs that the detection software flagged as potentially suspicious. She immediately assumed these were evidence of my surveillance. That evening, she confronted me. Ethan, we need to talk. I looked up from the electrical plans I was reviewing at the kitchen table. What's on your mind? Have you been monitoring my computer? I set down my pen and gave her my full attention. What kind of monitoring? Spyware, software that tracks internet usage and records conversations. Why would you think I was doing something like that? Because I found programs on my laptop that I didn't install. I frowned, as if considering this seriously. What kind of programs? She showed me the detection app's report, pointing to several items flagged as suspicious. I examined them carefully, recognizing them as standard system utilities and legitimate software. Beth, these aren't spyware programs. This one is part of Windows security. This one came with your antivirus software. And this one is the backup program we installed last year after your hard drive crashed. But the app says they could be used for monitoring. The app is wrong, or more accurately, it's flagging legitimate programs that could theoretically be misused, but aren't actually being misused. She stared at the screen, clearly wanting to believe I was lying, but unable to argue with my explanations. Why are you suddenly worried about spyware? I asked. I've been reading about women whose husbands spy on them during divorce proceedings. Are we getting divorced? The question hung in the air between us. Beth's face went through several expressions: surprise, guilt, calculation, and finally, defensive anger. I don't know, maybe. We haven't been happy for a long time, Ethan. I didn't realize you were unhappy enough to research divorce proceedings. I was just reading articles, trying to understand my options. What options are those? The option to have a life that doesn't revolve around your work schedule and your hobbies and your assumption that I'm perfectly content to be invisible. There it was, the victim narrative Arya had encouraged them to develop. I was the inattentive husband who took her for granted, and she was the neglected wife who deserved better. I had no idea you felt invisible, I said carefully. Can you help me understand what I've been doing that makes you feel that way? Really? You want to do this now? If my wife is researching divorce because she feels invisible, then yes, I want to understand what's going on. She sat down across from me, and for a moment I thought she might actually tell me the truth. Instead, she launched into a carefully prepared speech about emotional neglect, lack of communication, and growing apart over the years. It was a reasonable-sounding explanation that completely ignored her affair planning, her financial scheming, and her coordination with other wives who were actively betraying their husbands. She was positioning herself as the victim of a marriage that had gradually failed through mutual neglect, rather than the architect of its deliberate destruction. I listened without interrupting, taking mental notes about which elements of her story contradicted the evidence I'd gathered. When she finished, I nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate you being honest with me, I said. I had no idea you were feeling so disconnected from our marriage. You didn't? No. But now that I understand the problem, maybe we can work on fixing it. She looked genuinely surprised. You want to work on our marriage? Of course I do. You're my wife, Beth. If you're unhappy, I want to know why and how we can change that. This wasn't the response she'd been expecting. According to the group chat conversations I'd been monitoring, she'd anticipated that I would either become defensive and controlling or passive and defeated. A husband who wanted to address her concerns and improve their relationship wasn't part of the script. I don't know if it can be fixed, she said. Why not? Because I don't know if I want the same things you want anymore. What do you want? She hesitated, clearly trying to figure out how much truth she could reveal without exposing her actual plans. I want to feel like I matter, like my thoughts and feelings and dreams are important to someone. They're important to me. Are they? When's the last time you asked me about my dreams, Ethan? It was a fair question, and I didn't have a good answer. I'd been so focused on providing for our family and building the business that I'd stopped paying attention to Beth's inner life. The irony was that if she'd simply told me she was unhappy, I would have made changes. Instead, she'd chosen deception and betrayal. You're right, I said. I should have been asking. I should have been paying attention. Tell me now, what are your dreams? She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating whether this was an opportunity or a trap. I dream about having a life that's mine, she said finally. Not just being someone's wife or someone's mother, but being myself. What would that look like? I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. And you think you need to get divorced to figure it out? I think I need space to figure it out. How much space? I don't know. We sat in silence for several minutes. I was processing the conversation, looking for ways to use it to my advantage, while Beth was probably wondering whether she'd said too much or too little. I have a suggestion, I said finally. What? Let's try counseling before we try divorce. If you really want to save our marriage, we should get professional help. Counseling? Marriage counseling. Someone who can help us communicate better and figure out whether our problems are fixable. She looked trapped. Agreeing to counseling would delay her timeline and potentially expose her deception. But refusing would contradict her claim that she wanted to work on our relationship. I'll think about it, she said. Fair enough. But Beth? Yes? If you're serious about wanting space to figure out who you are, I'll support that. But I need you to be honest with me about what you're thinking and planning. Can you do that? Yes, she said, but I could see in her eyes that she was lying. That night, after Beth had gone to bed, I reviewed the day's group chat messages. The women were in full panic mode, convinced their husbands were onto them and planning coordinated retaliation. They'd moved their communications to an encrypted messaging app and were planning to meet with Talia's attorney within 48 hours. But I wasn't worried. In fact, their panic was working in my favor. The more frightened and desperate they became, the more likely they were to make mistakes that would expose their true intentions, and I would be there, through Aria, to help guide those mistakes in directions that would benefit me. The game was just getting started. The Oleander Lane ladies made their first major mistake Tuesday morning at 9:23 a.m. I know the exact time because that's when Talia posted a message to their new encrypted chat app, a message that Aria received along with all the others. Talia, M. Emergency. Cole says we need to move today. His attorney friend heard from someone that our husbands have hired a private investigator. Beth, Parish. What? How is that possible? Brielle, T. Julian was on the phone for an hour last night. I thought he was talking to his brother, but now I'm not sure. Mara Oal. Tom's been asking weird questions about my schedule. What if they really are coordinating? Aria V. I hate to say I told you so, but this is exactly what happened to me. The men figured out what we were planning and got ahead of us legally. Nola V. What do we do? Talia M. Cole's attorney says we file papers today, before they can freeze assets or establish legal advantages. Beth Parish. I'm not ready. I haven't moved any money. I haven't found a place to live. I haven't even told the kids anything. Brielle, T. Same here, and Julian will definitely notice if I try to access the HOA account today. Aria V. Ladies, you might not have the luxury of being ready. If your husbands are working with a PI, they probably already have evidence of your activities. Mara OL. What kind of evidence? Aria V. Financial records, communication logs, documentation of your meetings, everything you've been doing for the past few months. Talia, MM. Then we need to get ahead of the narrative. Cole's attorney says the first person to file usually has the advantage. Beth Parish. But what about the kids? What about our stuff? Area V. You can sort that out later. Right now, you need to protect yourselves legally. I was watching them panic in real time, making decisions based on false information I'd planted through Aria. There was no private investigator, no coordinated husband response, no legal threat to their timeline. But their fear was making them rush into actions they weren't prepared for. Brielle T. I can't file today. Julian will lose his mind if he gets served at work. Aria, Freistif. Brielle, with respect, Julian's feelings are not your priority anymore. Your financial security is. Talia, MM. Aria's right. We're past the point of worrying about their feelings. Beth, Parish. What about the money situation? I still haven't set up separate accounts. Aria, V. File first, move money later. Once you have legal protection, you'll have more options. Mara, OL. This feels like we're rushing into something we can't take back. Arya, V. You can't take back what they already know. The question is whether you're going to be proactive or reactive. Within 2 hours, 3 of the 4 women had made appointments with Talia's attorney friend for that afternoon. Only Brielle held back, too worried about Julian discovering the missing HOA funds. That gave me an opportunity to accelerate the timeline even further. I had Arya send a private message to Brielle. Arya V. Hey, I know you're worried about the HOA situation, but I have an idea. What if Julian finding out about the money is actually a good thing? Brielle. T. How could that possibly be good? Arya V. Because it gives you evidence of his controlling financial behavior. Think about it. You borrowed money for a legitimate emergency, and his reaction will show how he really feels about your autonomy. Brielle T. It wasn't really an emergency, though. Arya V. So, the point is, you needed money and you found a way to get it. His reaction to that will tell you everything about whether this marriage is worth saving. Brielle T. I never thought about it that way. Arya V. Plus, if you're filing for divorce anyway, the HOA thing becomes his problem too. Community property laws and all that. Brielle. TT. You think I should just tell him? Arya V. I think you should let him find out naturally and then document his response. If he's reasonable and supportive, maybe you reconsider the divorce. If he's controlling and angry, you have evidence for your attorney. Brielle et T. That's actually brilliant. Arya V. Just make sure you record the conversation if your state allows it. You want documentation of his exact words and tone. I was setting Brielle up to create the very confrontation that would expose her embezzlement while positioning her husband's natural anger as evidence of abusive behavior. It was psychological manipulation at its finest, and she was walking right into it. Meanwhile, I was implementing my own preparations. If 3 women were filing for divorce that afternoon, their husbands would be getting served with papers within days. That would trigger exactly the kind of coordinated male response that Arya had been warning about. Except this time, it would be real. I called Marcus during my lunch break. Remember that hypothetical conversation we had about information warfare? I said. Yeah, why? It's not hypothetical anymore. I need to connect with the other husbands on my street. Quickly. What's going on? My wife and her friends are filing for divorce today, based on legal advice from some attorney who specializes in aggressive asset protection. They think they're getting ahead of us, but they're actually walking into a trap. What kind of trap? The kind where their own coordination becomes evidence against them, but I need the other husbands to understand what's happening and respond appropriately. How can I help? Do you still have contacts at that private investigation firm you used during your divorce? Yeah. Why? Because we're going to need documentation that will stand up in court. Professional-grade evidence that shows these women have been planning coordinated divorces while hiding assets and having affairs. That's going to be expensive. Not as expensive as letting them control the narrative. That afternoon, while Beth was at her attorney appointment, I made contact with Tom, Julian, and the 4th husband, David. I used the neighborhood emergency contact list to reach them at work, claiming there was a security issue on our street that required immediate coordination. All 3 men agreed to meet at my house that evening. At 4:47 p.m., Beth came home from her attorney meeting, looking simultaneously exhilarated and terrified. She went straight to her laptop and began typing furiously in the group chat. Beth, Parish. It's done. Papers are filed. I feel like I'm going to throw up. Talia, M. You did the right thing. How do you feel? Beth, Parish. Scared, relieved, guilty, everything at once. Mara, OL. Same here. The attorney says Ethan will be served tomorrow morning at work. Arya V. That's perfect timing. Public service makes it harder for them to have an emotional reaction. Beth, Parish. What if he doesn't react the way we expect? Arya the V. What do you mean? Beth, Parish. What if he's not angry or controlling? What if he's just hurt? Talia, M. Beth, you can't start second-guessing yourself now. Arya da V. Hurt feelings don't change the fact that your marriage wasn't working. You made the right choice for your future. Beth Parish. I know. It's just hard. Mara OL. It's supposed to be hard. That's how you know it matters. I read that exchange with something approaching sympathy for my wife. She was clearly having second thoughts about the path she'd chosen, but her support network was reinforcing her decision and discouraging any reconsideration. That evening, Tom, Julian, and David arrived at my house at exactly 7 p.m. I'd prepared carefully for this meeting, gathering evidence and planning my presentation to maximize their understanding and coordination. Gentlemen, I began, your wives filed for divorce today. The reactions were immediate and varied. Tom looked shocked, Julian appeared calculating, and David seemed almost relieved. How do you know that? Tom asked. Because I've been monitoring their communications for the past week. They've been planning this for months, coordinating their strategies, and sharing information about how to maximize their divorce settlements while minimizing your ability to respond. I spent the next hour walking them through the evidence, the group chat messages, the attorney consultations, the financial planning, the affair documentation. I showed them how their wives had been building cases against them, while presenting themselves as victims of neglectful or controlling husbands. This is insane, Tom said. Mara's been having an affair? Multiple affairs, I confirmed, and documenting your work schedule to support claims that you're emotionally unavailable. Julian, I continued, Brielle has been embezzling from the HOA account, about $8,000 so far. Julian's face went white. That's why she's been asking about the books. And David, I'm sorry to tell you this, but Nola has been planning to claim you have anger management issues. She's been documenting every time you've raised your voice or seemed frustrated. David laughed bitterly. I knew something was wrong. She's been provoking arguments for weeks. The good news, I said, is that we now have evidence of their coordination. Their own messages prove they've been planning strategic divorces rather than responding to genuine marital problems. What do we do with that information? Julian asked. We coordinate our own response. We hire our own attorney, a good one who understands psychological manipulation and financial fraud. We document everything they've been doing, and we present a united front that shows this was a planned attack on our families rather than the result of failed marriages. Will that work? Tom asked. It'll level the playing field. Right now, they think they have the advantage because they moved first, and we're reacting emotionally. But if we can prove they've been planning this for months while lying to us about wanting to work on our marriages, we shift the narrative. What about the kids? David asked. Nola filed for full custody. That's where their coordination works against them. If we can show that all 4 wives were coached by the same attorney and followed the same strategy, it raises questions about whether their custody claims are genuine or tactical. We spent another hour planning our response. By the end of the evening, all 3 men had agreed to hire the same attorney, pool our resources for investigation costs, and coordinate our legal strategies. But the most important element was psychological. Instead of reacting as isolated, blindsided husbands, we would respond as informed parties who understood exactly what our wives had been planning and why. The next morning, I was served with divorce papers at the Parish electric office. Mary, our receptionist, looked mortified as she handed me the envelope. I'm sorry, Ethan. The process server said it was urgent legal documents. It's okay, Mary. I was expecting this. I opened the envelope and read through the papers carefully. Beth was asking for half of all marital assets, spousal support, and primary custody of our daughters. The filing claimed irreconcilable differences and cited my emotional unavailability and prioritization of work over family. Standard language that could apply to any marriage, but which I now knew was part of a coordinated strategy developed by women who had been planning to leave their husbands regardless of any attempts at reconciliation. I called Beth from my office. "I got the papers," I said. "Ethan, I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "Are you? Because according to the timeline in these documents, you filed yesterday afternoon, right after we talked about marriage counseling." Silence. "Beth, did you ever have any intention of working on our marriage, or were you just buying time to get your legal strategy in place?" "It's not like that." "Then explain what it's like, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been planning this for months while lying to me about wanting to save our relationship." "I wasn't lying. I was confused." "Were you confused when you were researching divorce attorneys? Were you confused when you were coordinating with Mara and Talia and Brielle? Were you confused when you were documenting my work schedule to support claims that I'm emotionally unavailable?" Another long silence. "How do you know about that?" she asked finally. "Because I'm not as oblivious as you think I am, and neither are Tom, Julian, and David." "What do you mean?" "I mean your coordination works both ways, Beth. If you and your friends can plan strategic divorces together, your husbands can plan strategic responses together." "You've been talking to them?" "We had a very enlightening conversation last night. Turns out all 4 of you filed papers yesterday using the same attorney and the same basic strategy. That's going to be interesting to explain in court. There's nothing wrong with getting legal advice. There's nothing wrong with getting legal advice. There is something wrong with planning to deceive your husband for months while pretending to want to save your marriage. Ethan, I'll have my attorney contact yours to discuss logistics. But Beth, this isn't going to go the way you planned." I hung up and immediately called the attorney Tom, Julian, David, and I had hired. It was time to show the Oleander Lane ladies what real coordination looked like. The war they'd started was about to become very different from the one they'd prepared for. The Oleander Lane ladies' encrypted chat exploded at 11:42 a.m., exactly 17 minutes after I'd hung up on Beth. I watched their panic unfold in real time through Aria's access to their communications. Beth Parish. Emergency. Ethan knows everything. He knows about our coordination, our attorney, our planning, everything. Talia M. What do you mean he knows everything? Beth Parish. He mentioned me documenting his work schedule. He knew about our meetings. He said the husbands had a conversation last night. Mara OL. Tom was weird this morning. Asked if I had anything I wanted to tell him before he heard it from someone else. Brielle T. Oh God, Julian left for work early and didn't say goodbye. He always says goodbye. Nola Phi. David asked me point blank if I was happy with my attorney choice. How would he know I hired an attorney? Aria V. Ladies, this is exactly what I was afraid of. They've been monitoring you and coordinating their own response. Talia M. How is that possible? We switched to encrypted messaging. Aria V. Encryption doesn't help if they already had access to your devices, and it sounds like they've been sharing information for longer than we thought. Beth Parish. What do we do? Aria V. You stick to your strategy and trust your attorney. They're trying to intimidate you into backing down. Brielle TT. What if they have evidence of things we've done? Aria 5E. Like what? Brielle TT. Like the HOA money. What if Julian figured it out? Mara OL. Or the trips with other people. Tom's been asking about my credit card statements. Aria V. Then you frame it properly. Financial independence isn't a crime. Having male friends isn't a crime. They're the ones who were spying on you. Talia M. Aria's right. We're the victims here. But even as Aria reinforced their victim narrative, I could see cracks forming in their coordination. Fear was making them question each other, doubt their strategy, and consider whether they'd made the right choice. Beth Parish. What if we were wrong? What if our marriages could have been saved? Talia M. Beth, don't do this to yourself. You made the right choice. Aria V. Second-guessing yourself now won't help anything. You can't unfile papers, and you can't take back what they already know. Mara OL. But what if they use our coordination against us in court? Arya V. How can they? You're four women who supported each other through difficult times. That's not illegal. Brielle T. It might look bad though, like we were planning to hurt them. Arya V. You were planning to protect yourselves. There's a difference. I was watching their confidence crumble in real time. The aggressive timeline they'd been pushed into was backfiring, creating exactly the kind of pressure that would force them into mistakes. At 2:15 p.m., Brielle made the first major error. Julian had come home from work early and confronted her about irregularities he'd found in the HOA account. Instead of following Arya's advice to frame it as financial independence, Brielle panicked and admitted to taking the money for personal emergencies. Brielle T. Julian knows about the HOA money. I told him it was for emergencies, but he's furious. He says I've committed embezzlement. Arya V. What exactly did you tell him? Brielle T. That I needed money for things he wouldn't understand, that I was planning to pay it back. Talia M. That doesn't sound bad. Arya V. It's not bad if you frame it right. You were being financially controlled and had to take emergency measures. Brielle T. But I wasn't being controlled. He just likes to know where money goes. Arya V. Brielle, wanting to control where money goes is financial control. Beth. Parish. What did Julian say exactly? Brielle T. He said I've betrayed the trust of our neighbors and damaged his professional reputation. He said he has to report it to the HOA board. Mara OL. Can he do that? Arya V. He's probably required to do that, but it doesn't change the fact that you were driven to desperate measures by an unsupportive marriage. Brielle T. I don't think that's going to matter. He's talking to an attorney about criminal charges. That message sent shockwaves through the group. The possibility of criminal charges hadn't been part of their planning, and it raised questions about what other consequences they might face. Beth. Parish. Can they really press criminal charges? Arya V. It depends on the amount and the circumstances. But Brielle, you need to talk to your attorney immediately. Talia M. This is getting out of hand. Nola V. What if they're all talking to attorneys about criminal stuff? What if they're trying to get us arrested? Arya V. That's paranoid thinking. Focus on protecting yourselves legally, not on worst-case scenarios. But the paranoia was spreading. Each woman was now wondering what evidence their husband might have collected and what legal consequences they might face. At 4:30 p.m., Mara broke. Tom had confronted her with credit card statements, hotel receipts, and a timeline that proved she'd been lying about her activities for months. Instead of maintaining her story, she'd confessed to having affairs and begged him to go to marriage counseling. Mara OL. I told Tom everything. The affairs, the group, the divorce planning, everything. Beth Parish. What? Mara OL. He had evidence, photos, receipts. He knew about the hotel visits, the fake girls' trips, all of it. I couldn't keep lying. Talia M. What did he say? Mara OL. He said he'd suspected for months, but wanted to give me a chance to tell him the truth. He's hurt, but he wants to try counseling. Arya V. Mara, that sounds like manipulation. He's making you feel guilty for his failure to meet your needs. Mara OL. No, Arya, he's right. I should have talked to him before I started having affairs. Beth Parish. What about the divorce papers? Mara OL. I'm going to withdraw them. We're going to try to work things out. Talia M. Are you serious? After everything we've planned? Mara OL. I love my husband. I was just confused and lonely. But that doesn't justify what I did. Arya V. Mara, you're making a mistake. Men say whatever they need to say to regain control. Mara OL. Tom's not trying to control me. He's trying to save our marriage. Beth Parish. What about our coordination? What about supporting each other? Mara Ol. I'm sorry, but I can't support something that was wrong from the beginning. And just like that, their united front cracked. Mara's defection left the other three women questioning their own choices and wondering whether their husbands might also be willing to reconcile. Nola 5. What if David wants to work things out too? Beth Parish. What if Ethan does? Talia M. What if they're all just better at this than we thought? Arya Phi. Ladies, you need to stay focused. Mara made an emotional decision based on guilt and manipulation. Don't let that derail your own plans. Beth Parish. But what if she's right? What if we should have tried harder to save our marriages? Arya Phi. You tried for years. The fact that your husbands are suddenly interested in reconciliation now that they're facing divorce papers should tell you everything you need to know about their priorities. Talia M. Cole says the same thing. Men only change when they're forced to change. Nola V. But what if change is enough? What if they really will be different? Arya V. How many times have they promised to change before? How many times have you been disappointed? It was a good argument, but I could see it wasn't working. The women were beginning to question whether their dissatisfaction with their marriages justified the deception and coordination they'd engaged in. At 6:45 p.m., David made his move. He'd arrived home with flowers, dinner from Nola's favorite restaurant, and a handwritten letter apologizing for his part in their marital problems. He'd asked her to read the letter, eat dinner with him, and then decide whether she wanted to proceed with the divorce. Nola the V. David brought me flowers and wrote me a letter. He says he knows he's been distant and wants to change. Arya V. That's classic manipulation, Nola. Grand gestures when they're threatened, back to old patterns once the threat passes. Nola V. But what if it's not manipulation? What if he really means it? Beth Parish. What did the letter say? Nola V. That he loves me and knows he's taken me for granted, that he wants to go to counseling and work on our communication, that he's sorry for making me feel invisible. Talia M. He's just telling you what you want to hear. Arya V. Exactly. Where was this insight and motivation before you filed papers? Nola V. Maybe the papers were what he needed to understand how serious the problems were. Beth Parish. That's what I keep thinking too. What if filing papers actually saved our marriages instead of ending them? Arya V. You're both thinking emotionally instead of logically. These men ignored your needs for years until you threatened to leave. That's not love, it's control. Talia M. Arya's right. Don't let them manipulate you into staying. But the manipulation argument was losing effectiveness. Both Beth and Nola were beginning to see their husbands' responses as potentially genuine rather than tactical. Nola V. I think I'm going to withdraw my papers too. Beth Parish. Really? Nola V. David's never written me a letter before, never brought flowers just because. If there's a chance our marriage can be saved, I want to try. Arya V. Nola, you're making a huge mistake. Nola V. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. 2 down, 2 to go. That left Beth and Talia as the only remaining members of the original group. I could see Beth wavering, torn between her original plans and the possibility that our marriage might actually be salvageable. Beth Parish. Talia, what do you think? Are we wrong to continue? Talia M. I think Mara and Nola are making emotional decisions they'll regret, but you have to decide what's right for you. Arya V. Beth, remember why you wanted to leave. Remember how invisible and unimportant you felt. Has anything actually changed, or are you just being offered promises? Beth Parish. I don't know anymore. Ethan seemed genuinely surprised when I told him I felt invisible. Maybe he really didn't know. Arya V. Or maybe he's a better actor than you gave him credit for. Talia M. The question is whether you want to spend the next 20 years finding out. Beth, Parish. What if I'm throwing away something good because I was too impatient to work on it? Aria V. What if you're staying in something bad because you're too scared to leave it? It was the crucial moment. Beth was balanced on the edge between proceeding with divorce and attempting reconciliation. Everything I'd worked for came down to how she interpreted her own feelings and motivations. Beth, Parish. I need time to think. Talia M. Don't take too much time. The longer you wait, the harder it gets to follow through. Aria V. Whatever you decide, make sure it's based on reality, not hope. Beth, Parish. I know. I just need to figure out what reality actually is. That evening, Beth came home and found me in the kitchen making dinner. She looked exhausted, emotionally drained from a day of crisis management and difficult decisions. Can we talk? She asked. Of course. She sat down at the table and stared at her hands for a long moment before speaking. Ethan, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. If I hadn't filed divorce papers, would you have ever realized I was unhappy? It was a fair question, and she deserved an honest answer. Probably not, I said. I was so focused on work and providing for our family that I stopped paying attention to whether you were actually happy with the life I was providing. And now that you know, what do you want to do about it? I want to fix it. I want to understand what went wrong and how we can make it right. What if it can't be fixed? Then at least we'll know we tried everything before we gave up. She nodded slowly, processing my response. What if I told you I've been talking to other men? Not affairs, but emotional connections with people who made me feel interesting and valued. I'd ask if those connections were more important to you than our marriage. What if I told you I've been planning to leave you for months, coordinating with other women who were also planning to leave their husbands? I'd ask if you were planning to leave because you wanted something different, or because you were running away from something difficult. What if I told you I've been documenting your faults and building a case against you for divorce proceedings? I'd ask if those faults were things I could change or fundamental incompatibilities we couldn't resolve. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. How are you not angry? How are you not screaming at me or throwing me out or demanding an immediate divorce? Because being angry won't fix our marriage, and because I understand that people don't usually go to these lengths unless they're genuinely unhappy. But I lied to you, for months. Yes, you did, and that's something we'll have to work through. But Beth, I'd rather work through lies that came from unhappiness than give up on a marriage that might be salvageable. She cried then, the kind of deep, exhausted crying that comes from months of carrying secrets and making difficult decisions. I don't know if I know how to be married anymore, she said. Then we'll figure it out together. Or we'll figure out that we can't, and we'll end things honestly instead of through lawyers and accusations. What about the other wives? What about the coordination and the planning? What about it? You were unhappy. You found other unhappy women, and you supported each other in making difficult decisions. I don't love the deception, but I understand the motivation. Ethan, there are things you don't know, things that might change how you feel. Then tell me, all of it. Let's put everything on the table and see what we're actually dealing with. She took a deep breath and began talking. For the next 2 hours, she told me everything: the group chat, the attorney consultations, the financial planning, the coordination with other wives, even the emotional connections with other men that had made her question our marriage. I listened without interrupting, asking clarifying questions, but not judging or arguing. When she finished, we sat in silence for several minutes. So, I said finally, what do you want to do now? I want to try, she said. I want to see if we can fix this. But Ethan, I need you to understand that I can't go back to feeling invisible. If we're going to make this work, things have to actually change. They will change, We'll make sure of it. How? Counseling, for starters, better communication, more attention to each other's needs and feelings, and complete honesty going forward, even when it's uncomfortable. What about the divorce papers? We'll withdraw them, together. What about the other women? That's their choice to make. But Beth, if we're going to rebuild our marriage, it has to be based on what we want, not what other people think we should want. She nodded, wiping her eyes. There's something else, she said. What? Aria, the woman who joined our group. I think she might have been manipulating us. I felt my chest tighten. What makes you say that? Just things she said, the way she pushed us to be more aggressive, the timing of when she appeared. It feels like she was steering us toward making mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Filing too quickly, not trusting our husbands, assuming the worst about their motivations, almost like she wanted our marriages to fail. I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this possibility for the first time. Some people project their own bad experiences onto others, I said. Maybe her divorce was so terrible that she can't imagine any marriage being salvageable. Maybe, or maybe she wasn't who she claimed to be. Does it matter now? Beth considered this. I guess not. What matters is what we decide to do going forward. And what do we decide? We decide to try, really try, and if it doesn't work, we end things honestly, instead of through lawyers and lies. Deal. That night, after Beth had gone to bed, I sent one final message from Aria to the group chat. Aria V. Ladies, I've been thinking about everything that's happened and I owe you an apology. I think my own bad experiences with divorce made me push you toward decisions you might not have been ready for. Seeing Mara and Nola reconcile with their husbands makes me wonder if I was wrong to discourage you from trying to save your marriages first. Sometimes the best revenge against a bad relationship is turning it into a good one. I hope you all find happiness, whatever form that takes. Then I deleted Aria's accounts and destroyed all traces of her digital existence. 6 months later, Beth and I had completed marriage counseling and were rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honest communication and mutual respect. Mara and Tom were also in counseling and seemed to be making progress. Nola and David had renewed their vows and were planning a second honeymoon. Only Talia had proceeded with her divorce, moving in with her trainer Cole and beginning what she described as the best chapter of her life. The Oleander Lane ladies group chat had been deleted, and the 4 women rarely spoke to each other anymore. Their coordination had been based on shared dissatisfaction rather than genuine friendship, and once that dissatisfaction was addressed or redirected, they no longer had much in common. I never told Beth that I had been Aria. Some secrets are necessary for the greater good, and some manipulations serve purposes beyond revenge. Sometimes the best way to fix a broken system is to introduce just enough chaos to force everyone to examine whether the system was worth preserving in the first place. And sometimes, the most effective electrical work happens in the shadows, where you can rewire connections without anyone noticing the power was ever off. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And in a world full of Oleander Lane ladies groups and encrypted chat apps and strategic divorces, honest felt like a revolution. The current was flowing properly again. The circuit was complete.